Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
Welcome to the Daily Cash Flow. My name's George Rossin.
Welcome to the Daily Cash Flow. My name is Donald Biden. I don't know what my name is today because it's fucking crazy because it's November 4th. We're filming today. Yeah. Polls are coming in. Man, I can't believe the past 24 hours have been nuts, George.
A day to be remembered.
It seems like every election is the new high bar standard of the craziest election ever, and we've never seen anything like this before, and
everything's at stake.
Everything's at stake. I mean, every election is like that. The bar keeps moving and moving and raising, and I can't figure out, and it sort of bothers me a little bit, the boarding up of properties and storefronts in these cities across America. I can't figure out why that's happening. Is that happening because storefront owners are planning for a Biden win and the Trump supporters are going to come out and riot and loot? Or the store owners are planning for a Trump win and the Biden supporters are going to come out and loot and riot? I can't figure that out.
Based on what I'm checking on social media, it really depends on who you're voting for as to the answer to that question.
So the store owners are just putting plywood in their windows. They don't care.
Yeah, but if you look at different media outlets, there's different interpretations about that. You know, that they say, oh well, this is clearly in because of Antifa or whatever, and then oh, this is clearly because of Trump's support.
I don't recall, and maybe this has happened in previous general elections. I don't recall this being a feature where people were boarding up properties in anticipation of looting and rioting. That to me, I don't recall, and it's crazy to me.
No, I think right now the striking thing about 2020 to me, out of all the crazy shit that's gone down this year, is how different the stories are that people are believing. That like at one point, I feel like people from different sides of the political spectrum disagreed on facts, but they were disagreeing on the same facts. As opposed to now, I feel like people are getting completely different facts, and they're living in completely different universes, and can't even discuss the same thing.
Well, there's media.
Yeah.
There's candidates that are very good at using the media and putting out messaging, and the machines, the political machines, the party machines they're well funded. They're very experienced. They've got teams of experts and all these different skills that they can handle messaging, advertising, media buys. They know how to interpret polling and numbers and extraction of interpretation of numbers and data. It's really quite deep. And so, sure, I mean, facts, there's facts, and then there's facts that you can put out there.
Right.
Which maybe then become facts, or maybe then they're not facts, like they didn't really happen, but you put them out and they have an impact or an effect or some response, or for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So it could be some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's culturally and behaviorally, it's just incredible to watch what's going on. I think about what it's going to mean for every election. I think about this, what it's going to mean for us in business, in the real estate business.
I asked you a little while ago. I was like, is this election going to really affect what you're doing? And
the standard interpretation of that is that the blue platform is perhaps not as great for business and real estate owners, and there's hot topics of reforming tax code, which real estate is embedded into that quite heavily, and there's sort of an attack on wealthy people, indirectly, perhaps more than directly, but just by virtue of wage gaps and the 99% and 1% and all of these issues that are facing us in our world today. And perhaps the blue platform is more sensitive to those things than the red platform. So where do you want to be voting if you're in the real estate business? And I'm not sure what the right answer is. There's talk about getting rid of the 1031 exchange, which is part of the tax code discussion. And it hasn't happened yet. There's that talk that comes up every election. I wonder if it's going to happen. That would really impact our industry negatively, I think. And then you have a guy in the Republican ticket who's running for re-election, who's a real estate guy,
Right.
and perhaps might have an agenda which would benefit real estate owners, but I'm just not so sure, because other parts of his agenda are such that it could, as we've already talked about, everything's connected, we're all connected, so other parts of his agenda may spill over and impact whatever pro-real estate legislation, pro-business legislation he allegedly says that he's for.
Will come under the heel of another agenda.
Yeah, it's very tough to understand and figure out if you really want to dig deep into it. I mean, the standard analysis is, lower taxes, lower corporate taxes, better for investment, better for jobs, better for the economy. So, that's going to be better for real estate. Yeah. I just don't know. This time, I just don't know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a historical time. I mean, it always is, to be honest, like you said. But yeah, it stands out.
Home prices, I think about that all the time, because home prices, while not directly correlated to apartment buildings, they do have some connection and some correlation. And we've seen home prices in 2020 during the pandemic in urban, densely populated urban centers get depressed, while all the home prices out in suburbs and in secondary and tertiary markets, where there's perhaps an outdoor component, vacation component, outdoor living lifestyle component that's different than being in a city center, all those home prices have come up. And home prices is a big issue, because with this election, we're talking about, if there's a blue win, the SALT taxes might then be back on the table, whereas Trump took the SALT tax deductions off the table in his tax code that he passed several years ago. And if you then put the SALT taxes back on, it could fuel home prices even more, because now people are going to be able to now once again write off the deductions for mortgage interest and state and local taxes, more so than they've been under the Trump administration. And in our area, in the Northeast Corridor, George, where home prices have really gone up, I read an article this past weekend that the Hamptons, for price points that were once $5 million for a beautiful Hamptons home in New York, they've gone up 291%. Are you fucking kidding me?
Wow.
So a $5 million house is now worth almost $15 million, and they're selling? What do you do with that? So politics plays a huge part in our industry, in our daily lives, and real estate, home prices. There's a really funny thing that I read this past week about tracking home prices. I don't think this is really referring to those that are buying the $5 and $15 million homes in the Hamptons. So it was an article about the Zestimate on Zillow.
Oh, okay.
And how people are like super dialed in, they're like thumbing through to see the Zestimate every day. They're checking it every minute, right? It's like social media for them. They want to see what Zillow tells them the Zestimate is for their home. Because there's some algorithm, there's some formula, and it changes moment by moment as closing data on new home sales gets entered into the world, the data world, the Zestimate updates. So people are checking their Zestimate. They may have bought a new home recently and they want to see if it's gone up $5,000 today, or if it's gone down $5,000 today. And the article goes on to talk about how people are glued to the Zestimate, and they're tracking the value of their home, their asset, as it relates to this algorithm. I find it to be crazy. I find it to be crazy, because I've always said, as you know, that the great thing about real estate is that if you buy income producing real estate, it pays you regardless of what
the market does.
The market's doing in terms of closed comps and comp sales. And so, if you're buying a home as an investment and you're tracking it on Zillow, checking the Zestimate, and you're nuts about it, I think you're doing yourself a great disservice, and you're going to take years off your life just from stress. I don't think it's the way to go with that. Look at your Zestimate once a quarter or once a year, or not at all, actually, because I don't even know what that algorithm is. I've seen Zestimates on homes be completely whack and off, because Zillow doesn't know if the home that's for sale that you're looking at has experienced recent capital upgrades or improvements. It doesn't track that. It only tracks the closing data. So there's no way to know if you buy a home for $700,000 and put $300 into it. Arguably, if you've done things the right way and if you're in the right market and you didn't overspend like a dope, you've got a house that might be worth $1 million now, 7 plus 3, but Zillow doesn't know that. It's still going to list it as 7. So there's discrepancies and disparities and there's imperfections with the Zestimate. Do not get caught up in the Zestimate. And I know you, George, you're probably looking at the Zestimate once an hour.
All the time.
Don't do it, man. Don't do it. I mean, it's crazy. Instead, buy income producing real estate that pays you regardless of what the market value of your home or your investment building is going to fluctuate. And you won't have to worry about anything. But
we're all beholden to an algorithm at some level at this point, it seems like.
Yeah, right. It's so common for people to feel that politics don't affect me, but it does have so much to do with you and all of us. Everything that's happening in this election and politically and what's on the ballot. And hey, how about California that just passed groundbreaking legislation? It passed its recent proposition, which is pro the gig economy for Lyft and Uber drivers. I mean, that's a landmark proposition that just got passed. So if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, that impacts you.
Yeah, a lot of the local elections are the things that have the most significant impact in these elections. You know.
Yeah, so I find it to be fascinating. I find it to be so directly correlated to so many things that I do in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I said yesterday. Yeah, I said yesterday about people on the fence about voting, that regardless of how you feel about either candidate, you need to be part of the conversation because that affects everything. We're responsible for the conversation, even if we don't think we're responsible for the candidate itself.
There's lots of different ways to cast your vote, even if it's not during an election, a political election.
What do you mean by that?
As a consumer,
Yeah.
don't buy a product, don't support a company. I mean, if it happens enough, company's going to suffer. They're going to get the message. They're going to have to change. As an investor, invest in things that you're passionate about that have a purpose for you. If you aren't a smoker and you don't believe in alcohol and you don't like gambling, you think all that shit's evil, don't invest in tobacco and alcohol and gambling stocks. Invest instead in environmentally conscious companies that are making our world a cleaner and better place for our grandkids and great-grandkids, if you're that kind of person. So, I mean, there's all different ways to invest where you're really casting your vote.
Yeah, voting with your dollar.
I mean, that's what we're talking about when there's a call for defunding the police. We're casting a vote. Don't give the police money, because money is power. Let's make the police less powerful in that argument.
Reallocate in another area. Yeah.
So you can do that as a consumer, as an individual.
Yeah, I think I remember you actually mentioning like Super Bowl performers, that if there's a Super Bowl performer.
Well, last Super Bowl there was the J-Lo Shakira thing, and there was all this talk the next day about how offensive it was and inappropriate it was because it was these two women shaking their asses on national TV, seen by 1 billion people across the globe and with no clothes on. So don't watch it. Right. But they're going to give it to you because that's what you like and that's what you demand. So you're not going to not watch it. You're going to watch it, and they're going to know that you're watching it because they know the ratings and they can track what you're watching. And so
pollsters talk about this all the time, about how people lie to the polls because they want to appear smarter or more virtuous or more, whatever to the polls. And so you have to sift through that information and say, okay, well, they might be telling me that they're saying they want this thing, but people really vote in those other ways. Like,
oh no, I don't drink. I don't drink. Oh no, I don't smoke pot. I will not. It's horrible for our kids. It's a gateway drug. I gotta go home and smoke some weed.
Yeah, don't look at my sock drawer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, as a consumer, as an individual, as an investor, every decision you make and every choice you make is casting a vote of sorts. Not even of sorts, it's casting a vote.
Right.
And it's important stuff. If you're a parent with a kid, you don't want to give your kid a cell phone, defund the kid, defund the cell phone. Right. Make sure they don't have the resources to get a cell phone. Internet access, there's all sorts of ways you can control certain aspects of your life by making choices, either monetary investment, purchase decisions, and I think it's major stuff. I remember this discussion as it relates to the debate in Hollywood over equal pay for female actors versus male actors, and it was a very interesting debate to me. I know nothing about Hollywood and how it works. I know business, and I know making a product and selling a product, so I have to think, and I want somebody out there to tell me because I don't know, but I have to think that to a certain extent, Hollywood's production of movies that feature male leads that make more money than female leads is in part driven by the marketplace. Perhaps does the marketplace rush out to the theaters and fill the seats more for a handsome, strapping male lead versus a female lead? I don't know, but I'd like for someone to tell me. George, do you know? Because
I don't. I mean, I think it's interesting. You mentioned before we turned on the cameras about that fine line between demand being naturally created by the market, but then also artificially created demand, that you can create demand by just providing. And so
I believe there's both.
So I wonder about that with Hollywood, is if some of those products are those demands that have been kind of manufactured for us to consume. I don't know.
I do believe that if you build it, they will come, right? If there is no demand for your product or service, if you build it and its quality and you're a great executor of that, and you put it out there, people will come, people will buy. I think I'm more heavily weighted on the notion that the people that create corporations, entrepreneurs, are going to put out products and services that they sense that there's a demand for, that they know that there's a demand for. So I really wonder if Hollywood's guilty of a pay gap between men and women, or if they are just really catering to the marketplace, and us as consumers, we're going out to these movies, filling the seats in these theaters for these movies with male leads. Maybe it's our fault.
Well, and I think a lot of it's history. That's if that's historically what has made money, then investors are always going to be on the side of safety there. Yeah. I heard somewhere recently talking about someone was saying, "Oh, I'm just waiting for a good idea. That's when I'm going to start and create my business or create my." And the person they were talking to said, "Oh, you mean like Hamilton?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, like a play that's about the early American leaders played by non-traditional, actors. That's a musical that's combined with rap and music." And they were like, "It's a terrible idea. If you look at it on paper, Hamilton sounds like a crazy idea that would never work, but it's made a tremendous amount of money." And so I think a lot of times what we're talking about is, what's the safe bet, but then also what's going to be, the thing that is really valuable for humanity, but also going to make a lot of money. You know, it's a trick.
Yeah. Speaking of demand, so we're in the apartment building business, and I always talk about trying to find areas to operate in and purchase buildings in where there's a supply constrained feature to the market, where there's good demand, good jobs, good employment, good job growth, things like that.
And
entertainment,
you're
culture.
Kind of looking at?
Yeah. And then, but with supply constraint, because in our business, you don't want to have your building located next to a vacant piece of land where somebody's going to come in and build something nicer, bigger, better than yours and compete with you.
Totally.
And I think it's fascinating what's happening over in Great Britain right now. There is an incredible multifamily housing boom.
Really?
People have been purchasing homes for the past 40 years in Great Britain and driving up home prices like 6-8% a year, which is an incredible growth rate. For an incredible amount of time, 40 years. And it's caused, at this point, such an unaffordability of being able to buy a home. There's such a barrier to entry to being able to purchase a home that now, and especially exacerbated by COVID this year, people are seeking more affordable housing options. Well, that's renting, and you know how I feel about renting versus buying. But it's a great example, 7%, 8%, 6%, year after year after year. And now, no one can afford it, you gotta go rent. And there's a lot of people that are looking to rent, and there is not enough inventory currently to satisfy all that demand.
So there's a lot more building options.
There's a lot more, they're building, I think there's like 45,000 multifamily units in Great Britain right now. There's 84,000 units in the pipeline being built.
Wow.
That's like a 2x over the existing inventory supply. So you're talking about absorbing 85,000 units in a market that has 45,000 units. Where is all that demand going to come from? All that demand is going to come from housing prices for everything else to purchase are just so high, people are going to rush to, and these developers are building all sorts of product types. They're building luxury, high-end, full amenities. So they're going to be able to take people that could have bought $1 million, $2 million, $5 million flats, houses, apartments, townhomes in and around London, and put them up in these great rental communities. And I'm sure they're going to do quite well.
So we're going to see Siegel Cap UK branch soon?
I don't think so. It's the UK. I'm not there, and I don't do luxury because I don't want to have that exposure. Yeah. But I bet you that the guys that are putting up the luxury high-end stuff over in the UK are going to get a lot of demand for their product. If you take them out of the discussion, you're still talking about scores and scores. We said 85,000 new units coming in the pipeline. In 2020, developers and investors have invested over $5 billion in building new multifamily product. In 2019, it was about $2.5 billion. So they've more than 2x'd year over year the investment into the multifamily housing sector just to get more inventory in the pipeline, more shovels in the ground, more housing starts. We call that housing starts in our business. So the housing starts for multifamily in Great Britain is going to impact existing home prices. So perhaps they're going to build their way out of this 6, 7, 8% year over year price appreciation that they've had for the past 40 years. They're going to build their way out of it. And I'm a big proponent of that. I think that that's a real solution that should be on the table for all of these places that have very high costs of housing. Where there's available land, build. Let the builders build. New inventory is going to reduce the cost to rent, it's going to reduce the cost to buy, and it's going to fill the marketplace with all sorts of new options, and it's going to increase competition. That's good for the consumer, the home buyer, the renter. I like that for places like California, for New York. I mean, let them build. In our area, George, Northeast Corridor, coastal New Jersey, there's not a whole lot of land to build new things. We're in a supply-constrained market. So a lot of these towns, when there's developers that come in on whatever the building opportunities are, whatever the vacant land is that exists, these towns, they let them build, and they do. Yeah. And they put up new product, and it competes with whatever's there. But there's not a whole lot of that where we are because there's really no supply of vacant land to really go build on. But in places like California, you can go a little further west. You don't have to be right on the coast. Of course, coastal property is more in demand and higher property values than inland. But California's, I'm picking on California because they're the most populous state in the nation. It's an election. I've heard that quote about 50 times over the past 24 hours. But also because they have a real housing crisis going on. It's real, and it's painful for the people that live there, and I feel for them. But these legislators and these government leaders have to let the builders build. They have to come up with incentives and financial motivation to bring in more developers. And California's got to consider to build their way out of this issue.
Yeah, I was curious.
Versus versus regulating their way out of the issue. It's crazy to me when you regulate existing housing stock. All you're doing is limiting supply, and prices continue to go up. It's mind-boggling to me. Supply and demand, everybody. Let them build. Build your way out of a housing problem. Build your way out of expensive home prices. Build your way out of rents that are too high. If you've got the available land, build on that land.
Yeah, what happens when that land has been built on already? Like, I guess you said our area is somewhat like that. Yeah.
Well, you've got, in a supply-constrained area, you've got different factors that are in play. We're in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Asbury Park has huge swaths of vacant land. Let them build on the land. They're not. Politically and contractually, there's a mesh of stuff going on in our little tiny little world of Asbury Park, New Jersey, that is limiting the supply of new housing starts coming online. You go to towns down the road, nearby, inland a little bit, there's some building happening, but there's also huge demand coming to coastal New Jersey. New Jersey is a high demand housing state. Yeah. People want to live around New York City because it's less expensive than living in New York City, typically, right. Not in 2020. People want to live on the coast, at the shore, because of the lifestyle and the amenities and being outdoors and being by the beach. So New Jersey's got a lot of different things that make it a high demand housing state. There are places where there's available land and they're building. It's feeding the constant new demand. Building without new demand is just going to result in empty properties.
Right.
Building to absorb an increased amount of demand is going to result in absorption of your newly built properties. So New Jersey is one of these places, and all around New Jersey, it's one of these places where building will typically result in absorption because it's such a high demand housing state. If you go out to wide open places, I like to pick on Mississippi. If you go to the swamps of Mississippi and put up a new building, you're going to be hard pressed to fill it. There's just not a lot of demand to live in the swamps of Mississippi. In California, there's a lot of demand to live there. I'm baffled at how places where there is an availability of land don't explore policies. Here we are again talking about policies and government and politics, right? It all ties together. But it baffles me how they don't explore more than they're doing already. Because I know that they're exploring it, but you got to put it on the table and 10x it. Let them build. And there's investors and developers that will come in and build and absorb all that demand, and it will equalize housing prices. I mean, we see this in California's a rent-regulated state. New York City is a rent-regulated city. Not everything. There's free market product in New York City, but there's a lot of regulated. There's about 1 million regulated apartments in New York City, and all year long, year after year, there's talk on both sides of the aisle, on all segments of the income curve, about what to do about New York City's escalating costs of housing. And it's really fascinating to watch. They increase regulations, which limit supply and just further fuel the increase of cost of housing for the free market stuff. It baffles me. So I think building your way out of a housing issue and a price issue and an unaffordability issue is definitely 9 times out of 10 the right solution. And I applaud Great Britain for somehow figuring out, or maybe no one figured it out, it was just sitting there waiting, land was sitting there waiting to be built on. But I applaud them for investing in, and developers and investors going into Great Britain and investing $2.5 billion last year, $5 billion this year, building 85,000 new multifamily units in a market where there's already 45,000. I mean, that's an incredible growth.
Yeah.
So that's really going to have an impact on the multifamily housing market in Great Britain. It's going to have an impact on rent prices. It's going to have an impact on your home price. If you own a home in Great Britain and London and around the suburbs, it's very expensive. More expensive even than New York in a lot of these places.
Yeah, I have some friends over at Broadstairs, and they're looking for a house right now. It's very hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. Prices are up in the suburbs and the city. I don't know what's happening in London City, but if it's anything like New York City or San Francisco, maybe there's some price pressure from COVID this year. But it's so expensive that normal people can't afford it anyway. But they're going to build. They're going to build 85,000 new homes. People are going to be able to rent them. They're going to be all different types of qualities, all different locations. And I think that that's exciting for Great Britain. And
We have another renter nation coming into the world.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
That makes sense. Anything at home that feels similarly noteworthy as far as real estate, multifamily kind of trends that you see?
At home in our country?
Yeah.
I continue to think about what's happening in 2020 with COVID and with the different segments of the real estate market here, office, retail, warehouse, multifamily, special use. So multifamily we've seen perform very, very strong, not in the urban centers, but in and around the urban centers where people left the cities to go to places that were more affordable anyway. Multifamily buildings and rents have performed very well in 2020 versus office and retail, movie theaters, malls. I mean, come on, we don't have to say it again. I mean, it's Shitsville for those guys. And, the owners, let's talk about this, George. Yeah. Who owns all of those malls, retail properties, office properties? Who owns all of them? Because multifamily is doing well. A lot of different types of ownership structures and ownership profiles of multifamily. But who really owns the stuff that's taking a beating in 2020 from COVID? Is it people like you and I that own big, huge office towers, big, huge multi-use retail and lifestyle facilities, big, huge retail centers? Do you and I own that stuff, George?
I certainly don't.
I don't either. Or is it the banks? Is it the private equity funds? Is it the hedge funds? Is it the REITs? It's the REITs and the private equity funds. And they're having a tough year. They're not able to make their redemptions. So redemptions are when an investor in a REIT or private equity fund calls you up on the phone and says, hey man, I want out. I want to redeem my shares. I own shares of your private equity fund. I want to cash them in. I'm moving on.
I would imagine that's happening a lot more this year than
the private equity funds are getting historically high redemption requests since the beginning of COVID. They don't have the liquidity to meet the redemption requests. So, what that means is, and by the way, it's tens and tens of billions of dollars. There's investors out there that are calling up their private equity fund manager and saying, it's been a good ride, COVID's beating me up, cash me out, buddy. I need my money. They can't get their money out. The rents aren't coming in, offices, retail spaces, malls, empty, no rents. They're not paying on the loans. We can talk about those loans separately because that's a whole other issue. What's happening with all those probably non-performing loans on these asset types? Let's have a different discussion about that. The investor can't get their money out. Now you may say, well, too bad. It's an investor, there's risk with everything. What does it really matter, right? Some rich guy has their money in a private equity fund that owns the huge, city tower or the big, fantastic town center with multi-use facilities and a Whole Foods and a great state-of-the-art movie theater and baseball fields and parks and housing and all that stuff. Who owns that stuff? Is it a rich guy who invested in their private equity fund? So typically, the people that own these private equity funds are not rich guys that have huge amounts of money on these huge, sexy glass towers. They're public pension funds. Who's in the public pension funds, George? Now let's talk about that. That's you and me.
Right, yeah.
That's public money. The teachers union, the police union, the construction union, all the unions, all the insurance money, the public money, taxpayer money, normal, regular investor, normal human being money. That's who's in the pension funds, people that have pensions. The pension funds are investing with these real estate equity funds on the development, ownership, and management of these huge, sexy glass office towers. So yeah, you should care about an investor not being able to redeem their money out of a private equity fund which owns these huge, sexy office towers, because that's your money.
Right, yeah.
You should care about that. I mean, it's a real interesting topic because I think most of America sits back and says, well, why the fuck should I care about some Donald Trump type of guy that has $1 billion invested with, some other guy in the Chicago Tower or the whatever tower? You should care because in addition to the high net worth investor that has some money in that game, the pension funds that are in there too. And those pension funds they're in managed stock portfolios, they're in real estate funds. So you should really care about a fund's ability to honor redemption requests from an investor. That investor may be you.
Right, and especially these investments are often viewed as conservative already, and if we're not able
they're
to...
viewed as conservative and safe because they're high quality,
Yeah.
they're limited with debt. But look at what's happening this year.
Yeah.
There's no office rents coming in like there was a year ago. There's no retail rents coming in like there was a year ago. So there's, Trumbull, who's a big Core Plus holder of this stuff, they've sold off a bunch of properties already in 2020 at deep discounts.
Right.
And when that happens, it creates a comp in the marketplace, and now you're creating a marketplace of office and retail assets with prices that are lower than what they were a year ago. That's your money.
And that goes back to what you've said before about us all being connected.
We're all connected.
Yeah.
We're all connected.
If a conservative market is having a problem, then everyone is affected by that kind of situation.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
man.
No, that
We
makes
are all
sense.
connected. And I always thought that was such an interesting thing because I think the messaging that we all get is, between the income and wage gap and the 99% and the 1% and the haves and the have-nots. It's so fascinating because the 99% with their pensions are invested in all that stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yet we're out here talking about depressing values on sexy glass office towers in urban centers. I mean, that's our money.
Well, and even if you're not invested actively in the market, how the market performs is going to affect, the price of milk on the corner. So
we are all connected. So pay attention to that stuff. Pay attention to what your pension fund is investing in. Pay attention to what your 401k is investing in. Because I promise you, your pension fund, your 401k, all of that stuff is invested in stocks and core plus real estate holdings, and all that shit's getting slammed, and that's your money. So look for other places to put your money. Consider multifamily. If there's a way for you to gain access to a multifamily investment or have exposure to that, I highly recommend it. Because it's your money that's out there. I mean, just read the paper every day. There's articles talking about these huge real estate private equity funds. They can't make the redemptions. They're selling these buildings for less than what they bought them for, big discounts. That's your money, man.
Yeah. You mentioned the non-performing loans. That was something that you were talking a little bit about.
So this is so funny to me as well. So New York City, as an example, and I isolate New York City because it really behaves unlike any other market, certainly any other urban center in the United States. New York City has been one of these real estate markets that's ironclad. I mean, for years. Even when it dips, it comes back, and it comes back strong. 2 minutes ago, we just talked about influx of demand, new demand. Well, New York City is one of these markets that constantly has new demand. Culture, university demand, job growth, job demand, having access to all of those things. It's a constant demand river flowing towards New York City year over year over year. So much that it's very common. There's these families that owned buildings from decades ago, a century ago, more. There's a lot of these real estate families in New York City that have owned real estate, that never sold their real estate. They've just bought more slowly over time, over the decades, over the generations. And a lot of New York is owned by this profile of person or family. And they don't have a lot of debt, many of them, on their portfolios. They've owned them for so long, there's no more mortgages. They have no need to take out mortgages. They have huge rent rolls coming in every month. Banks love these families. They love those type of borrowers. So sure, a bank is going to look at the rent roll of a building. It's going to look at the expenses of a building, the net operating income of a building. It's going to look at vacancy rates. It's going to look at all of that stuff like it's required to, like they should anyway, like anyone should, because a loan is an investment for a bank. So they look at all of that stuff and they underwrite all that stuff, but then they go to the warm body who's there. Who's signing the note? What's their financial wherewithal? What's their net worth? Let's see the personal financial statement. Let's see the assets. Let's see the schedule of real estate owned. And that's what New York banks love, because there are so many of these wealthy legacy families in New York that own so much of this New York real estate that there's a whole market, there's a whole pool of these types of borrowers when they eventually want to do a new project or take out a small loan, small relative to the asset value, that the bank says, yeah, you know what, it's a pandemic, but you're so wealthy, you have so many assets and you have such a high net worth that this is a no-brainer loan. So we don't care as much if the pandemic has caused your rent roll to go down a little bit. We don't care as much if there's been more vacancies in 2020 than ever before in New York City, and certainly with this building that you want us to lend you money on. It's okay because you're the 800-pound gorilla here, so we're gonna give you this loan. It's cool.
I heard this described as betting on the jockey rather than the horse.
Bet on the jockey. Well, in any investment, in any business, I always recommend bet on the jockey and the horse, but really a horse without a good jockey is a shitty investment. So, and that's really the point of this. You need there to be both. You need there to be a great operator, a great owner, a great borrower if you're a bank. We've talked about this before, George. And what we're seeing is in New York City right now, there's so many of these office buildings with retail storefronts on the ground floor. I mean, crickets, no money coming in, no rent coming in. So owner of these buildings have a couple of different choices. They can call up their bank and say, I can't make my mortgage payment. We got to work something out. Can I go to making interest-only payments and then defer the principal portion until this pandemic subsides? A lot of that's going on. Or they can call up and say, I can't make my mortgage payment interest-only or interest and principal. We have an issue. Yeah. That's not happening yet. And the reason that's not happening yet is the net worth of the borrower pool for New York City assets is so huge that if a bank is willing to defer principal payments and just accept an interest payment, they'll do that just to maintain the relationship in the business. But also the borrower pool that has such a high net worth is able to say, you know what, I'll continue to make the monthly payment to you like I'm obligated to do. Thankfully, that's a good thing. That's the right way to do it. Because I can afford it. Yeah. You know, I don't want to. Yeah, I'm a wealthy family and I'm a legacy family and owner of lots of real estate, but I can float this for a little while, 6 months, a year, whatever it's going to be. So right now in 2020, we are not seeing a slew of non-performing loans occurring because the pool of high net worth borrowers is keeping it all going. They're keeping it all going for now. You've also got these private equity guys that own a lot of real estate in New York. You know, operators such as me, George, that will do syndications and bring in private equity investments from pools of high net worth accredited investors and buy office buildings, multifamily buildings, whatever types of properties, but they own a lot of it. And they have access to capital. So for now in New York City, we're not seeing a slew of non-performing loans coming up because the banks are allowing either interest-only payments or the owners of these properties are able to kick the can and fund the payments every month, despite there not being rent payments coming in, because typically these guys need the rent to be paid in order to then pay the banks. But yeah, you're betting on the jockey as well as the horse, and it's so important when you're making any type of investment to have the person driving the ship be experienced, skilled in so many different things, have the financial wherewithal to navigate through these waters, because you don't want someone who's not financially capable running an expensive deal, because they need to have skin in the game and they need to understand the concepts that investors are concerned with. 2021 is going to be interesting. Yeah. You know, what we're seeing right now is the redemptions causing the Core Plus holders to sell at discounted prices, but the loans still not non-performing yet. And 2021, you know, at some point you're going to get through the reserves that these private equity owners of real estate have to pay mortgage interest and taxes and insurance. Those reserves, maybe a year or so they have. In 2021, those reserves are going to be up. So unless there's tenants in the buildings that are paying rent, we may start to see some non-performing loans in 2021. But so far in 2020, it's been quiet on all fronts with non-performing loans. And that's good for the banks, banking sector. I mean, thank God we need a strong banking sector. And you know how I feel about the banks, George. I'm no fan of them most of the time, but they perform an absolutely essential and necessary service in our world and our economy. And for that, we need them to be healthy and strong. I know that there's a lot of debate about, you know, greedy fucking banks and propping up banks and, you know, they're banks and they don't need money and they just steal from us and rape us and all that. A lot of that's true, but they perform an essential service. I mean, just think about it. Everybody who complains about that. Do you have a mortgage on your home? You need your bank. You know, did you just refinance your home because you got a cheaper rate? You need that bank to give you a cheaper rate. Like, you know, come on, you need the banks. They perform an essential service. So mind your P's and Q's when you're dragging them over the coals, but we need them and we need them to be strong and healthy. And for now, the commercial real estate loan sector has been okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, and that goes back to, you know, you said, you know, you should shop your banking products properly and, you know, do your own kind of, you know, underwriting for that.
Banks offer products just like Walmart and Costco
exactly.
offer products.
So they have good products and they have bad products.
Yeah.
You just got to, you know, choose the right one.
And like the jockey and the horse analogy, there's good banks and there's bad banks. There's good bankers, there's bad bankers. Yeah. There's bankers that I've been in business with for 30 years, and they move from bank to bank to bank. That's what happens in that world. They stay there for like 5-10 years, and they get absorbed. There's aggregation and consolidation in the banking industry, and they end up at some other bank. I follow them because they're such great jockeys that you know, once they can settle in, I know that they're going to deliver for me. So for me in the banking industry, it's way more about the jockey than it is the horse. I will follow a good banker around, as I said, for 3 decades, compared to just being loyal to a bank because my accounts are there.
Relationship, execution.
Yeah. So banks, love to hate them, hate to love them.
I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned, you were talking about the Zillow thing before.
Yeah.
There's another tech thing that you brought up, the Casablanca, which
that's funny. So here's what I love about Casablanca. And we've talked about fintech and real estate apps and how technology is impacting real estate. So Casablanca. They're Tinder for real estate. They started off in New York City. It's swipe right, like you enter your preferences, are you a renter or you're a buyer, are you looking for a place that allows pets, whatever, and you start swiping, and it's like, do I like it, do I like it, yes, no, swipe left, swipe right. And that format, obviously they've lifted that format from Tinder, but it's cute and it's funny. But here you've got Tinder, a dating app that's impacting the real estate world because some real estate entrepreneurs said, well, that's a cool format. People are sort of trained on that format, the swipe right format. We could do that with real estate. By the way, that's not unlike how Amazon started. Jeff Bezos was like, books, what can we sell online? He was one of the first, he was the first retailer of books online. He's like, what product do people just want all the time? We can just sell, we can get it, like there's not gonna be a shortage. Books, right? He started with books. Now it's everything, but he started with books. Maybe Casablanca's gonna be Tinder for real estate, but it expands into so many other things. Maybe that'll be the format on how we purchase stuff moving forward 5-10 years from now. We're gonna swipe right to get toilet paper. I don't know. But it's funny because I appreciate and think it's cute that they lifted from Tinder. And look, our relationship with real estate is not unlike our relationship with people that we want to date or have sex with, using Tinder. So we have this crazy relationship with real estate, sometimes unhealthy. And I think it's funny that they took the format from Tinder.
Yeah, no, I think it's a testament to how we kind of interact with our technology every day and how that becomes more and more a part of everything that we do. So
with Tinder, you want to swipe right when you want to get fucked. So with Casablanca, you might actually end up getting fucked if you swipe right. So be careful what you use real estate technology for. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. But I do know that last year that they were responsible for about $100 million in sales volume. Not bad. Now, New York real estate things are obviously very expensive, so that's going to be a higher dollar amount and less volume compared to suburbs and less expensive markets where it's going to take more transaction volume to make up that $100 million mark. But still, great. I mean, that's a great number, and maybe they're onto something. As consumers, we should be aware of how we are consuming our real estate needs and searching for our real estate and investing in our real estate. And there's going to be some more that I'm going to talk about this coming up. Obviously, we're here because what I do every day, and I seek investment from the accredited investor community to co-invest with me on apartment building deals. So we're talking about seeking to invest in real estate. So that's always on the tip of my tongue, George. But for the accredited investor, for the non-accredited investor, we have this relationship with real estate. Make it a healthy one, and definitely explore technology. There are so many things that are out there now. You've got Fundrise and Acorn and all these things now which are making investing in real estate more accessible to accredited investors, to non-accredited investors, and it's a real healthy thing, I think, for us as an economy and a market and as consumers. And technology is really finding its way to being able to enable you, the consumer, to have more access, more information, more access, and that's what technology is really doing. And there's a great company that I love. It's out there now. They're just launching, called Happy Nest. And it's an app, it's a real estate investing app, and you get to, for as little as $10, you get to invest in real estate. And there's other apps that are out there that are doing that as well. This one's great because the minimum is $10. A lot of these other apps have way higher minimums, 500, 1,000, 10,000. Some of them you have to be an accredited investor. That's not everybody, of course. But Happy Nest, with a $10 minimum, it's going to enable the whole world to walk down the street, swipe up, and invest in something. And the more we can get people to do that, the more income gaps are gonna narrow rather than widen. The more it's gonna be great for you and for your kids and for your grandkids. There was never any access to this stuff. Technology's making it accessible.
So we're coming up a little on time. Do you want to do Zest Quest and then move on, or do you want to keep
George,
going?
I wait all week for your Zest Quest. So on what time is it?
So right now it's 6.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up.
We'll do a Zest Quest and head out?
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite Zest Quests. I don't know what you're going to think about it, actually. So
You're going to find out in a minute.
Yeah, I am. So what are 3 things that you judge people unfairly for? And if you want a moment to think about it, I can give you mine.
What do I judge them unfairly for?
Yeah, so
you want to know why I'm a dick?
Well,
Because that's sort of what I sense.
Yeah.
Looks, right?
Yeah. So, well, like for example,
am I shallow? Like, am I a shallow jerk? I judge people on looks, body mass, and
well, I think those,
size of their wallet.
To be fair, those things I think everyone has an element of. But I think I was thinking more along the lines of, like, for me, the phrase "buddy." When people call me buddy, and they're not a close friend, man, do I judge them.
That's really funny that you bring that up.
Yeah.
I shared that with you from literally my entire life until a few years ago. My entire life, so I'm 52, I would say up until I was maybe 47, I hated that. But the use of the word buddy, it was like commoditized. It was so diluted down, and it lost all meaning to me.
It's a false relationship builder.
Yeah, and it sounded so common and so overused that it just became, I didn't feel special. I didn't feel like anything. Something changed with me about 5 years ago, and I started to say buddy.
Interesting.
Maybe
Why?
I don't know. Maybe it beat me up and wore me down, and I just gave in. I remember my dad was saying that to some people. And I heard him say it. I want to say that I think I probably started saying, at 47,
right, yeah.
I think I probably started saying buddy because I heard my dad say it.
Interesting.
Subconsciously, I think that's probably what happened. And I never recalled or noticed him using that phrase before ever. But not that long ago, I started hearing him say it. And I remember taking note because I was like, man, I fucking hate when... And here I am, and I do it myself. And when I do it, I feel like I mean it.
Right.
Although I know that when I say it, the person hearing it's probably thinking the same thing I was my entire life, which was shut the fuck up. Why are you using?
Although maybe you need to report
buddy?
back to me. Maybe I've got this all wrong. Maybe this is a relationship builder waiting to happen.
Try it. Try it for a week and,
Okay.
and see how you feel. And try for 2 weeks.
All right.
The first week, it's going to take you a week to get the distaste out of your mouth, but I think maybe the second week you're going to be like, oh, all right, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
I think people respond to it.
Yeah. How about rolling luggage? 'Cause that's my other one.
Rolling luggage?
Yeah, do you use rolling luggage? Because if you do, I definitely judge you at the airport.
I have a kid, so I do use rolling luggage. Here's what I use when I'm traveling with my kid, rolling luggage, stack a bunch of shit on top of it because I got, 20 more things that I'm now carrying through an airport that I never had to carry before I had a kid. So rolling luggage is great. And when you have kids, I'm going to say, George, shut the fuck up. Remember when? Because, you're going to be one of us at that point. And
well, and that's why the question is the way it is. These are unfair judgments.
Well, I will also tell you that carrying luggage of any kind, I call the schlep. I hate the schlep. Traveling, I love traveling, but the schlep factor, I can't stand it. So I'll typically send my luggage ahead of my arrival at my destination so that I don't have to carry it on a plane and deal with the baggage claim and all that. That stuff drives me crazy. I feel like a sheep or a penguin or whatever the animal analogy is in these airports with, and they lose the bags and, I'm walking down the airport, I got a backpack, my arms are full, I'm rolling luggage. That is not for me. I find it uncomfortable, I find it unpleasant, I find it, you gotta go to the bathroom. It's like, what do you do with all that shit? So I don't love traveling with a lot of luggage. I try to make arrangements to get rid of the luggage ahead of time and then ship it back when I come back. I've got my clothes already there. I get on the plane with my briefcase, it's got my laptop in it. So that's the way I prefer to travel. But sometimes you get caught. You're with a family, you're going somewhere new, it's a family trip. 2020, we're all, driving places this year. You throw a bunch of luggage in the SUV, you go visit your family if you can, if it's safe or whatever's going on. But yeah, I don't like traveling with luggage, but it happens for all of us. George, it's great. I live vicariously through you. I would love to just be like a tall, skinny millennial that can walk around with a fanny pack.
Right.
And
Well, and that is where this judgment, I think, is
with your
coming
patchouli
from.
oil and not shower, and you don't need a change of clothes or whatever the fuck you guys do. That sounds really nice to me. But for the rest of us, I need to travel with my briefcase, which is like a laptop bag, and a backpack with. I have a fucking CPAP machine now because I'm old and I can't breathe at night, so I got to sleep with one of those Darth Vader things.
Right.
Fun fact about me. So I got to bring that with me.
Right.
I got to bring, so game's over for me. I am definitely rolling through the airport with luggage.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm sure there will be a time where I look back on. I think I am trying to kind of connect myself back to that 24-year-old George, backpacking in Nepal or whatever. And so I think it's an unfair judgment. I'm fair.
What's the other one?
Last one is constipation. When people talk about being constipated, my immediate thought is you're either 1, underhydrated, or 2, not eating enough vegetables. And I know that's completely unfair. There are people that have conditions. There are people that are unwell and can't help it. They need medication for it or whatever. It's not unfair judgment, but that's my third one.
That is an unfair judgment. You're a dick, George. I didn't know this about you, but you are a bona fide dick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you throw up a dick image on the screen with a picture of you? Because
absolutely.
I'm revealing stuff about myself all of the time.
Yeah.
We've now just revealed to our listeners that you are a dick.
I'm fair with that. I love that.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't experience a whole lot of constipation. I eat my vegetables. I don't know if that's why I don't have constipation, but.
Well, then you're safe from my judgment.
If you ask my brothers this question about me, they will tell you that Peter's full of shit. And thankfully, I'm not constipated, so I have an ongoing cycle about being full of shit and not being full of shit. But we have to get the camera on George. One of these moments you can see him, but he's like this perfect strapping example. He's like 6'2". He weighs 160 pounds soaking wet. He's got washboard abs. He can do a plank for 15 minutes. He's probably hung like a water buffalo. I don't know, full head of hair, everything that I don't have. George, God bless you. No one can say anything about you. Clearly, you can say something about the rest of us.
I'm going to put this all on my LinkedIn.
We're constipated, luggage rolling, fuck you, George.
Well, there you go.
Great Zest Quest, George.
Yeah, I don't think we can fit in any other greatness than what you just put for us. All right.
Thanks for watching.
Have a great week, Peter.